Welcome back, NNP fam. Here we are after a disappointing, forgettable, and anticlimactic week 0. I hope some of you still had a great weekend of watching ball, and I'm excited to get into it in this week's episode. But first, we got to warm up with locker room talk. NNP watched the BU at Cuse game at the bar in Tampa Bay on Sunday. Shout out to Hat Tricks, and shout out to the group of strangers that we befriended. We bonded over the Bruins, St. Pete, Florida, and upstate New York, but I digress. Right as Cuse wrapped up the cover of -6, Coach Evans and I headed over to Raymond James Stadium to take in the Stadium Series between the visiting Boston Bruins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. What a game. If you didn't watch it, I highly recommend the highlights. There was literally everything. Goal in the first 11 seconds. Bruins had a 5-1 lead, and it was looking grim for the host Lightning. We had a goalie fight at center ice. Due to some 5-on-3 power plays, we saw the Lightning knotted up at 5 on a Kucherov goal about halfway through the third period. Then the Bruins thought they'd won it in OT, but the refs had a very poor execution of a penalty call. So even though Pasternak scored in OT, it was immediately called off because the back official had the Bruins for a delayed penalty. But it was super weird because the Bruins had possessed the puck all the way down the ice, and it was awkward. It was awkward. The Bruins were already celebrating a big OT win, but had to have been a whistle issue for the back official. It was a cold night in Tampa, so it had to have been that. But it actually was a cold night in Tampa too. Like, so cold, in fact, that they had to actually heat the ice to keep it at the right temperature. A complete 180 from what they were planning to have to do, if I were to guess. But game goes to OT. Nobody scores in OT. Gensel wins it in a shootout after Swayman played his tail off. Swayman actually fought off all 9 of the Lightning shots in OT. But with the Gensel goal, it capped off the largest deficit the Lightning have ever come back from to win a game. So, hell of a game. And again, like I said, watch the highlights. NHL does a great job putting those events on. But as for everything that wasn't the game on the ice, we had great seats. Shout out Coach Evans for making that happen. But it's impossible to watch the game in the stadium, period, no matter how good your seats are. You find yourself watching the Jumbotrons the whole time, but you're there for an awesome experience, which it was. Tim McGraw is a legend, but his performance after the first period was straight booty cheeks, no other way around it. What else? Oh, shout out Norcane, the official luxury sports watch of the NHL. Coach Evans and I got to meet a bunch of the people on their team before the game. Great people. Thank you for the beverages, Norcane. And they were there to unveil their newest watch. They just dropped an incredible NHL limited edition watch. The details are dope. No free ads, but these guys bought me a beer, so go check them out. Norcane.com. That's NORQAIN.com. And their new NHL limited edition watch. But overall, really cool experience. Plus, Coach Evans and I have been to both Stadium Series games that the Lightning have played in. The first being in Nashville in February 2022. The Bolts are 2-0 in Stadium Series games. So if anyone has a connect with the team, they should know that if they've got a third, me and Coach Evans should get free tickets. All right, moving on from locker room talk. Quick line drill segment here. Did anyone else see Coach Nadalin of Towson hitting a half-court shot at halftime of the Towson basketball game this past weekend? I love his commitment to an appearance, especially since the game he was most likely there to promote was their game against UNC that was canceled. And I mean, for those that remember, I said he was the last guy anyone in Division I lacrosse would want to fight in last week's episode. But what I forgot to mention or failed to mention is he's usually the first pick in noon hoops as well. So this is the least surprising thing that happened this weekend, in my opinion. Less surprising than this next item that I think we can all agree on, and that is the broadcast for the Rutgers-Jacksonville game in Naples was absolutely booty cheeks as well, a lot like Tim McGraw. There were audio issues, camera issues. I guess it is truly week 0 for players and broadcast teams, and here's where I'm going with this. It was a neutral site game, so somewhat difficult to get a solidified plan in place with a veteran crew. And it was a little peek into what the reality of Paul Carcaterra's idea around February lacrosse would look like if it even got green lit, which I don't think it ever will. Great idea in theory, and greatly appreciate Kark thinking outside the box, but I think there are too many roadblocks. Now, for those of you that didn't see it, I'll read the tweet to you right now. Lacrosse people, I have an idea. This is from Paul Carcaterra on Twitter. Fans want the sport as early as possible, just not for games to be played in single-digit temps or in an indoor practice facility with no spectators. Hear me out. This would be an example for men's lacrosse, but also could be used for women's lacrosse, but scaled differently based on more teams. There are less than 80 men's Division I teams. Have 4 host venues for the 4 weekends in February. The host venue would have 3 games on Friday, 4 on Saturday, and 3 on Sunday. The host venue would have a total of 10 games over 3 days, satisfying 20 teams. 4 host venues can be, but not limited to, the Dome, Ford Field in Detroit, Lucas Oil in Indy, the Star in Dallas, multiple venues in Southern California, Arizona, Atlanta, and countless options in Florida. Not all venues could host all weekends. Example, Dome has basketball some weekends, but you would only need 4 host venues per weekend. Turf or multiple playing surfaces would be a requirement based on field conditions. This would offer a great fan experience, streamlined media opportunities for coverage and exposure, sponsorship and event partnerships, and an opportunity to bring high-level lacrosse to some non-traditional areas. People will argue there would be an average of 2 extra away games and budget issues. Last I checked, some teams travel for scrimmages. Ticket sales and event sponsorship could offset some team travel expenses. Teams can be creative with fundraising and a small price to pay to give the players, coaches, support staff, and the fans what they deserve. Great lacrosse played in suitable and desirable playing conditions. The reality is the sport isn't getting pushed back and ending in June anytime soon, and teams don't want to play numerous midweek games. We need some solutions. Feel free to share your thoughts or another idea. Kark, really well thought out. I worry that there's too many barriers. All right. A friend of mine close to the game, we were talking about exactly this, about exactly these barriers. He also believes it's a nice idea in theory, but what does it actually mean and look like in reality? In reality, it means flights, buses, hotels, and meals. I know he says that teams usually bus to scrimmages, but they don't stay in hotels, that's for sure. It means extra support staff traveling to help with stats, broadcast, and film, or paying for those people at these host venues. Speaking of paying, how much do the neutral site venues cost? How do you work out practice times at these venues? I personally think that this will probably be the easiest, but certainly something to think about. Games on Friday means teams are traveling at the latest Thursday, if not Wednesday night. More missed class, more time away from families for the coaching staff. My source continued, quote, things like this for the Maui Invitational and Battle for Atlantis work because they're destination spots, but also basketball is a revenue-generating sport from both ticket sales and TV contracts. And from the lacrosse lens, Lucas Oil Stadium ain't turning the lights on for free and absolutely zero chance you pack the stands enough to break even, end quote. All good points, and I agree with them, but this is where I get the most hung up. And it's something I learned from a 2002 movie with Ice Cube and Mike Epps. It's all about the Benjamins. Bottom line, lacrosse is not a revenue-generating sport, and men's lacrosse is certainly a detriment to making Title IX easier for programs with football. I should say with athletic departments with football. And with the news about the Rutgers athletic budget shortfall coming out this week, there ain't no way something that would cost more money for lacrosse would be approved. Hell, everyone fought shot clocks because of budgets back in the day. But let me know what you think of that. I love the idea, Kark. I can't see it happening. But yeah, let us know what you think in the comments or DM me. Let's talk on Twitter about it. Moving on, let's look back at some of the storylines from the games that did happen in week 0. First off, in general, indoor field sizes was a topic. Utah versus Delaware, the neutral zone, so between the boxes, was actually 10 yards short. This played actually right into the hands of Coach McMinn's squad and the Utes and the tempo they like to push. And honestly, I don't hate it. I'm in the camp that the field should be shrunk, similar to what the PLL has done. You then had Army and UMass. The width of the field was about 7 yards shorter than regulation, 6.7 yards to be exact. They basically played the football sidelines. Again, I like this. Makes things more exciting, and I like the way this was executed because they use those football sidelines. This makes it as clear as possible versus using some random line painted on, creating confusion. But back to that Utah game. Shout out Kevin Brown from Inside Lacrosse for live streaming the first D1 game of the year. It took Utah a minute to get their feet under them, but once they did, the transition offense could not be contained. Awesome for the Utes to be able to get that W while traveling from the West, having to change the game time and day, playing indoors, all of it stacked against them, but they found a way. Dan Aristia pointed out a primetime performer for the Utes beyond Ryan Steins, who had a hell of a day, was Joel Mullen, Division II transfer from Limestone, RIP. He was tagged as an All-American and the short stick D-Midi of the year in Division II last year. And in his opener with the Utes, he had an assist, 2 ground balls, and a caused turnover. NNP salutes you, Joel. Moving on, arguably the most exciting game of the weekend, which ended up not being the most entertaining game because the broadcast was so booty cheeks. I know it led to multiple people turning it off. Was that Rutgers versus Jacksonville game in Naples, Florida. 11-10 OT win for the Scarlet Knights. Rutgers was leading 7-4 at half. Then it was 9-8 Rutgers after 3. The Dolphins won the fourth quarter to force overtime, but Colin Kelly of Rutgers drove up the righty hash from below GLE on an invert look. Where they seemingly cleared the whole side for him, whole right side for him, and he found near side high from about 12 yards away with all his momentum going away from the goal. Objectively, a hell of a play from the kid. Sometimes you just tip your cap. I'm not sure Coach Brzezinski would have schemed up anything differently defensively if he was even given the opportunity. It's a tough pill to swallow because you want to blame the Jacksonville netminder, but he's part of the reason they were in that spot. He had 17 stops on the day, including 10 in the first half, when Rutgers could have run away with it, but instead he held the lead to 3. Stick taps to Della Rocca. I'm gonna speak honestly here, and I hate to do this, but it's journalism, right? I was not impressed with Rutgers' athleticism on offense. I didn't feel like anyone had much pop. And usually you can chop that up to cold weather early in the season, but not this time with the game being in Florida. Maybe the weird surface, more carpet/astro than traditional field turf. Could certainly lead to less ability to dig in, but still I just wasn't seeing it. Which leads me to say it will be interesting to see how new offensive coordinator Scott Beda grows with this group as they ultimately want to be playing their best ball come Big Ten time. And we're going to talk about it, but their schedule certainly, they're running into a juggernaut this weekend. But Moving on to another game on Sunday. You had Cuse over Boston University in the Dome. BU battled, but the Orange were just too much. In reality, it wasn't as lopsided in the stat sheet as the 13-6 final would lead you to believe. Biggest disparities came in shots, where Cuse outpaced the Terriers by 12 total and 8 on net. And John Mullen won 14 of 22 draws to control possession for the Orange, but everything else was pretty even, which I found surprising. I will say one of those even stats was both teams going 0 for 3 on the EMO, and this caught my eye. Cuse is too talented to do that, full stop. But this is why we have goalies, and BU's Connor Phillips was up to the task, but BU's EMO unit is going to be scrutinized all year after Coach Silippo had them number 1 in the country last year in conversion percentage. And with him taking his talents to St. Sebastian's, go Arrows, shout out Wash. How does that unit, BU's EMO unit, look this year come Patriot League playoff time? You start the year 0-3, you certainly dug yourself a hole after being the number 1 team in the country last year, but we'll also be on Spallina watch all season, like we talked about last week. He dropped a low-key 5 points in this one, bringing the total he needs to become the number 1 point man in Cuse history to 57. I do want to give a nod to LSM for the Terriers, Donald Vernaren. He tallied a goal in transition off an assist from senior Jimmy Core. But it wasn't your prototypical LSM goal. Jimmy skipped it. Jimmy Core, Tackman, skipped it to him on the lefty pipe, him being Donald. He hitched topside and wrapped it around Jimmy McCool low. It was really well done. Go look at that highlight, because that's just some good old-fashioned transition lacrosse. But turn our attention to a different game. You also had Penn State hosting the Colgate Raiders. I'm pretty sure Penn State's Haluba Hall is a regulation-sized field, because we were talking about field sizes, but that certainly didn't do the Penn State goalies any favors. Between the two netminders, Penn State had 5 saves versus Colgate's 19 shots on net. Imagine if Colgate could have generated a few more shots. Yikes. Preston Hawkins started the game for Penn State, but got the hook after giving up 4 goals in 17 minutes with 1 save. Hayes Schreiner then assumed the position, but wasn't much better, ending the day with 10 goals against and 4 saves. Mr. Hawkins had a 20% save percentage. That was a starter, while Mr. Schreiner got credit for the win with a 28.5% save percentage. Why did this happen? Was this a blip on the radar because of Haluba Hall? Is Colgate that talented? Is Penn State in trouble with their netminder situation? Oh boy, these are all questions that are going to have to be answered. I mean, I will say, with Preston Hawkins having gotten the start as a true freshman, what does this result do for his confidence? Where is his head going to be going forward? I truly believe the position is upwards of 85% mental, and if you find yourself with more rubber behind you than a dog toy salesman has on his shelves, your headspace is in big-time jeopardy, especially for a rookie. But looking ahead at the slate, this weekend, weather is wreaking havoc again. Friday's about to be a banger of a day. By my count, there are 13 games on Friday. If you're listening to this, you probably already know that NNP pulled together a schedule on Twitter. Give it a bookmark so you can stay up to date. Breaking news is that Georgetown and Hopkins has officially postponed their game for this weekend, which is just absolutely killer. But couple of games I have my eye on is this weekend is the Battle of the Long Island Sound. Stony Brook Seawolves at the Sacred Heart Pioneers. Stony Brook with a coaching staff shakeup with Coach Daly and Coach Quentin Germain joining the staff. Sacred Heart coming off a loss in the MAC title game to Siena and lost their leading point scorer to graduation. It's time for John Murray from Summit, New Jersey to assume the leading point role and grad student Tucker Spencer to balance out his game a touch for the Sacred Heart Pioneers. Tucker Spencer went 33-5 last year. And to be honest with you, as I was looking at that, I want him to balance it out, but in reality, I actually want him to shoot more, as he had a 40% shooting percentage last year. So I take it back. Shoot more, pass less, Mr. Spencer. But keep an eye on the battle for the Long Island Sound. Another Friday game you have to keep eyes on is Siena visiting Boston University. This will be the first official action for the Saints since the passing of their beloved coach Liam Gleason. The Saints clearly have more to play for this spring. Last game I want to highlight on Friday is Utah visiting Duke. Coach McMinn and the Utes don't back down. I think they will be outmatched, but I don't think the gap is as big as people think, and it's certainly not as big as it once was. The Utes came to Durham in 2024 for a first-round NCAA tournament game, taking the L 19-7. This will be a great test for the Utes and Ryan Steins, their offensive leader. I know they won't back down and will fully commit to push transition whenever it is their style of play. And yes, I chose those words intentionally because albeit the Utes play fast, they are not helter-skelter. They know when and where to push and are super talented to do it. As for Duke, not sure anyone saw Max Sloat popping off for 5 goals and 1 assist, but it's not that surprising. Sloat, a 6'3", 220-pound senior, is a lot to deal with for any team, let alone the Bellarmine Knights. Ben Johnson added 4 goals, also not surprising. Another absolute load to deal with at 6'1", 220. Good luck trying to slow either of them down with the end of your stick or even your chest, for that matter. Those dudes are coming. Newcomer Kyle Colsey found himself a nice little spot on his new team after transferring from UVA this summer. He was 1-3 on the day against Bellarmine, but he did take 8 shots. If he can find Twine even a little more efficiently, Utah is going to have to have a plan for him. You know, the one Duke storyline I'll be following closely is the roles of the coaching staff. Sources told NNP this summer that there was going to be a shakeup. Matt Danowski, longtime offensive coordinator, would be replaced by Coach Caputo in that offensive coordinator spot. And then Kevin Unterstein would replace Coach Caputo as the defensive coordinator, leaving Coach Matt Danowski as an associate head coach with no coordinator responsibilities. If this is true, and from the film it seemed to be the case, it will be interesting to me because Duke's coming off a season where they ranked 4th in the country in goals per game. I do think Blue Devils fans have a little bit of a gripe for how Brennan O'Neill's best years were utilized in Durham back in the day, but keep an eye on this. Like I said, from the Bellarmine film, it's tough to tell, but I think it's confirmed. There were no commentators on the broadcast to confirm it, but I'm almost positive Coach Matt Danowski was running the box, Coach Caputo coordinating the offense, and Coach Unterstein handling the defense. So those are our games on Friday to keep an eye on. Games on Saturday that I'll be keeping an eye on. St. Joe's at Syracuse. All the whispers are saying that St. Joe's took it to Hopkins and Army in scrimmages. Now, scrimmages are scrimmages, so they must be taken with a grain of salt, but I'm not sure those words, St. Joe's took it to Hopkins and Army, have ever been paired that way in a sentence before. Q's better be prepared, especially because it's the return of the prodigal son, Coach Scott Meehan. The Baldwinsville native is the new head coach for St. Joe's, with Taylor Ray taking his talents across town to UPenn this summer. Coach Meehan is an awesome story. Upstate New York kid, takes his talents to a, quote, distant land, end quote, a.k.a. Washington and Lee. And yes, Washington and Lee, Central Virginia, is a distant land for us upstate folks, but here he is returning home, hoping his Syracuse family welcomes him back as a son and not a servant, as the parable goes. Speaking of Army. Okay, speaking of, I guess we weren't speaking of Army, but I want to speak about Army. It'll be interesting to see the Army-Rutgers game on Saturday. I was not impressed with Rutgers and their win over Jacksonville. They want to be relevant in the Big Ten in the worst way, I know that, but this is a game they need to compete in, Rutgers does, if they want to be relevant in the Big Ten. I mean, Army doesn't care that the Scarlet Knights are in the Big Ten. They're going to square you up and shut you down defensively. That's Army, no matter who you are. Good luck to the Knights earning a slide and creating some offense against this Army defense. Now that I say that out loud, I realize that we've got the Black Knights against the Scarlet Knights in this matchup. Knigget on Knigget. But I mean, even if the Scarlet Knights are able to create some offense and get their hands free, best of luck beating Sean Byrne, the backstop for Army. He's certainly poised to have a great year and already started so against UMass this past weekend. Another game on Saturday I'm pumped to see. Villanova at Penn State is intriguing. Obviously, you already talked about the Penn State goalie situation. How do they handle that? But also, how does Villanova look on the offensive side of the ball with their new offensive coordinator, Paul Mita? The Cats seemed to put up some good numbers in their Princeton scrimmage last weekend, but it was held inside at Princeton at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, so woof. I did have two more games that I wanted to chat about. Unfortunately, one of them was Hopkins at Georgetown, and like I said, breaking news, that has officially been postponed. I don't know. We'll skip touching on that one just because they are postponing it, but I mean, huge year for both teams. Bottom line, huge year. Huge expectations for Georgetown within their program. I think they're a little overlooked by some in the media and across the landscape, but huge expectations from Hopkins. It's now or never for the Blue Jays. And I hope that the Romo result, shout out Quinn Kesnick for the nickname for Robert Morris, it wasn't fool's gold. I hope Hop can continue to improve. But I will say Collison's a lot to deal with, and Hunter Chavez is basically a vending machine. As long as you put $1 in, you're getting something out. And that reference is, put the ball near him as an assist with his hands free. He's gonna put a tally on the board. But the last game I want to touch on, Loyola at Maryland. All right, both teams had games canceled last weekend. There are rumors that Maryland found a last-minute scrimmage with Navy as they both had games canceled. Not sure what Loyola did with the game cancellation, but Loyola has a new offensive coordinator in town, esteemed alum and national champion as a Greyhound, Coach Justin Ward. What kind of impact does he have on this team that has not performed at the level they have come accustomed to since that title run in 2012 and the 4 years of having Pat Spencer and Gray and Green? Big time question marks there. Going to be interesting to see. Then on the other side, what does Maryland look like after yet another trip to Memorial Day Monday, but coming up short? Many people have picked them as the number one team in the land to start this year, but sources have told NNP their scrimmages have shown some holes and some inconsistencies. I mean, that said, it's impossible to bet against Coach Tills, but he no longer has a secret weapon. That is Logan McNaney. Although Logan McNaney did just get added to the coaching staff with the departure of Coach Daly. So Logan is, I'd assume, going to be working super closely with their name starter, Brian Ruppel. But Eric Spanos does return as a graduate student and will be wearing the Be the Best number 1 this spring. For those of you who don't know, number 1 is to Maryland as number 22 is to the Syracuse offense, or number 40 is to the Naval Academy's men's lacrosse program. It's passed down to a worthy recipient. So Spanos has got a lot of weight on his shoulders wearing that number 1 jersey. The Terps also return A.J. Larkin and Will Schaller on defense, who are both absolute animals in their own way. The questions for the Terps that I have are, how do the two Yale transfers fit in, Chris Lyons and Leo Johnson? And how do they fare at the faceoff X? Nothing near post is hearing that the Vermont transfer, Henry Dodge, will be splitting time with one of the other guys on the roster. Not exactly sure who that will be. Could be senior Mitchell Lloyd, junior Sean Creeder, or sophomore Jonah Carrier. My vote is Jonah, but that's strictly because he's from upstate. But yeah, a little bit of a preview of what we're looking for this weekend. Enjoy those or any others you prefer to watch this weekend. And don't forget, UVA hosts Colgate before the Super Bowl on Sunday. So lacrosse ain't over on Saturday. Warm up your Super Bowl party with a little UVA Colgate action. Okay, moving on here to our last segment. Let's recap the gambling corner. We're still workshopping that name, but before we recap, have to give a shout out to the Hampton Pirates, who covered in an 18-9 loss against Mercer. The spread was 14.5, and looking at it through rose-colored glasses, the Pirates lost to Mercer last year 23-3, and the 9 goals they did score in that 18-9 loss matches their 2025 season high. Unfortunately, it was short-lived as they failed to cover against NJIT in a 22-8 loss on Tuesday. All right, recapping the gambling corner. Play of the weekend was going to be VMI minus 1.5. That was a victim of week 0 sucking because the game was canceled. The other play of the day was Rutgers Jacksonville under 23. We already talked about that game, but book it. All right, so the NNP play of the day is 1-0 on the season. One of our contributors, Rotev, he picked Cuse minus 6 and the over, going 1-1. I thought over 2, but both goalies had other plans, having 12 saves apiece on the day, and BU couldn't really capitalize off the ride backs like they have in the past, but we move on. So Rotev was 1-1. Looking at this weekend's gambling corner, I got a few picks for you all. I got over 23.5 Villanova at Penn State. I'm going St. Joe's plus 6. Okay, where there's smoke, there's usually fire. I'm going to parlay Army and Michigan money line. And I know the odds aren't great there, but I had Georgetown in that as well as a 3-legger. But with the Georgetown game being canceled, I'm sticking with the Army-Michigan moneyline parlay. And I'm also putting Army minus 2.5 on that list. All right, so you got over 23.5 Villanova, Penn State, St. Joe's plus 6, Army minus 2.5 at Rutgers, and you've got an Army-Michigan moneyline parlay, which was supposed to have Georgetown in it as well, but that game is canceled. And if you can get FanDuel in your state, I've heard Denver Air Force line is 22.5. I'd take that over. So that's NNP's picks. Gambling Corner correspondent Rotev is riding his orange at minus 6. He said put the bankroll on it. I hate that move, but do what you want. He obviously had them covering last week. He also likes the Richmond Robert Morris over at 22.5. That's the Richmond Robert Morris over, 22.5. Also this week, we've got the privilege of being introduced to our third member and contributor of the Gambling Corner. He goes by the name In the Crease Al. His picks this weekend are Boston University and Siena over 22.5 and UMass over Merrimack minus 9.5. Together, Rotev and In the Crease Al have their best bet of the weekend as Denver minus 4.5 over Air Force. That's at home at Peter Barton Stadium. And then the three of us, we decided this week that we're going to need to pick a hungry dog of the weekend. Shout out Hank from PMT, but we're picking a hungry dog of the weekend, and that pick this weekend is Holy Cross. Money line is plus 270. All right, they're going to be at Hofstra. or you can get them at plus 3.5. But our hungry dog are the Holy Cross Crusaders. Good luck. All right, good luck to everyone putting out wagers there on lacrosse this weekend. But before we leave, before we wrap this whole thing up, I want to share my condolences to Bobby Van Buren. The news out of Columbus about BVB tearing his ACL and consequently missing this season sucks for him. It also sucks for Ohio State and lacrosse fans in general. Mr. Van Buren was poised for a huge year with the Buckeyes and was a big part of why NNP had them in the Final Four preseason. And I think Van Buren was the front runner for best cover defender in the country. But shout out to him. Best of luck on the recovery trail. All right, great show. Appreciate y'all listening. Sound off in the comments or shoot over a DM if you got something you want covered on next week's show. But until then, you know to always abide by rule number 1, nothing near post.